The first 20 cards of the Murder at Castle Nathria Hearthstone expansion have been revealed. If you've already seen the Brian Kibler gameplay video, you'll know that that brings us to the grand total of 20 cards. Just one side note here, Blizzard has already announced that a few of those cards have seen balance adjustments since they filmed that video with Kibler, so just know that the cards are going to look a little bit different. I'm looking directly at the Hearthstone website. These are the accurate cards that have gone through final balance testing according to one of the Blizzard designers via Twitter. Paladin here, Elitist Snob. This was a card that we saw in the Kibler video, and it's also one of the cards that has actually been adjusted. In this case, a nerf. In the video, it was a 4/4. It's now been changed to a 3/4. Elitist Snob. For each Paladin card in your hand, randomly gain Divine Shield, Lifesteal, Rush, or Taunt. I've already seen some people comparing this card to Ziliax. I don't think it's quite that good. It does have the advantage that you can put two of these decks in your deck if you choose. Likely this would go into some type of Control Paladin deck. Control Paladin tends to run a lot of Paladin cards, and it tends to have a lot of cards in hand. So you should be able to get 3 to 4 of these keywords on the card when you play it on a pretty regular basis if you work it into that kind of a deck. I would rate this card as being slightly better than Talon Forging. I don't think Control Paladin necessarily needs the card draw from a Talon Forging, but it's going to give you a Taunt, Lifesteal, Divine Shield, so it can help you clean up the board just a little bit as you try to move into later into the game into your Leviathan and Cariel turn. So I would expect Elitist Snob to see some experimentation, if not see some play. I think this is going to be a pretty okay card going into that next expansion. Moving down to Mage, we got to see a lot of Mage cards in the Kibler video. He was actually playing this Mage deck. And you can see here that actually there's 2 changes to cards here that were played in that video. Nightcloak Sanctum previously only had 2 charges. It now has 3 charges. And Deathborn was actually nerfed from 5 mana to 6 mana. So just looking at the cards here, Frozen Touch, this is pretty much a Frostbolt reprint for me. Deal 3 damage. It's a frost spell. But it does have upside. Infuse 3, add a Frozen Touch to your hand. Infuse, of course, when this card is in your hand. If a minion dies on the board, that's 1 infuse. So this is in your hand, 3 minions on the board die. It's been infused 3 times, and it will add this back to your hand. And we've also learned from that video that when this is back in your hand, it's going to reset. You can infuse it 3 times, and then you'll be able to get an additional copy. So potentially you can go infinite with Frozen Touch. This is a card, I feel like this is guaranteed to see play when Frostbolt was in Standard. Frostbolt was in most, if not all, Mage decks. Should be really good here. Could be used for removal, can also go face. I would think as we get into playing this card, you don't necessarily want to get too obsessed with trying to infuse it. You just use it when it's good. Occasionally you'll be able to generate an extra copy. Cold Case. Summon 2/2/2 Volatile Skeletons, gain 4 armor. So the Volatile Skeleton, we can actually see right down here, Volatile Skeleton. Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. And based on that reveal video, we can see that that damage can actually go face. So didn't get to see this card in action, but I think this card should be relatively pretty good, and I don't think you necessarily have to run it in a Volatile Skeleton deck. It can just be used for a little bit of armor gain, and just a little bit of removal. Put 2 small minions on the board that are also going to deal 2 random damage when they die. I think this is going to be an okay card. Could see some play here. The Mage location, Nightcloak Sanctum. Freeze a minion, summon a 2/2 Volatile Skeleton. I feel like this card is almost guaranteed to see some play. It's an extra freeze effect. It's going to put a Volatile Skeleton in play, and now that it's up to 3 charges, it just feels pretty good. Pretty much the way that I'm looking at all the locations is you can get them down on the board, and then you just use them when you actually need them. So you basically pay for this ahead of time, and then you're going to be able to use it in the future turns. Could use it same turn if you needed to, but it's just a way to be able to almost invest mana into a future turn, which is should be pretty solid all around for most classes, as long as their location just isn't absolutely terrible. Deathborn, 6 mana, deal 2 damage to all minions. Summon a 2/2 Volatile Skeleton for each killed. This is removal. It's probably not going to be as good as Blizzard unless you're running specifically for a Volatile Skeleton deck, at least in my opinion. And I think when you would play this card, we would be trying to set this up just like we would set up a spammy Arcanist. We would want to kill as many minions on the board as we could, even if that means killing our own minions, to be able to summon the 2/2 Volatile Skeletons and get those on the board and back in place. So I do think this card is going to be, it's going to work in the deck that it's intended for, or the package that it's intended for, which is the Volatile Skeleton package, also a Frost spell. could be pretty important when we think about replaying spells with, say, Magister Dawn Grasp. Mage Legendary has been revealed here. Kel'Thuzad the Inevitable. 8 mana, 6/8. Resurrect your volatile skeletons. Any that can't fit on the battlefield instantly explode. This is another card. It's going to be hard to tell exactly how good it is. I've already kind of theorized a little bit of an OTK deck that could be used with this. If you can get enough volatile skeletons destroyed throughout the course of the game, then you can play this. And if your opponent doesn't have much of a board, that's going to be a lot of damage going face. I could also see this card kind of fitting into more of like the Barren Glacier, where you might want to run the volatile skeleton cards, but maybe you don't need this big 8 mana card. For me, anytime a card gets to like 7 and 8 mana, you don't see that card seeing a whole lot of play in Hearthstone. That's just the way it is. It's too expensive. It has to be a really, really good card with a really high payoff to be able to see play in Standard Hearthstone, just because if there's not enough value there, you waste an entire turn, you don't get anything out of it, you fall behind on board and you die. So 8 mana makes me a little bit concerned about this card, but I do think it could see some play. Mage also revealed here a secret, Vengeful Visage. After an enemy minion attacks your hero, summon a copy of it to attack the enemy hero. It's another secret for Mage. I don't think the secret is all that great. I can't imagine anybody playing this secret in a deck. I can't imagine Secret Mage actually being a deck that people would want to play. You know, this is something that you could potentially generate randomly off of a Rune of the Archmage. It's also a secret that's going to be pretty easy to play around as you're going through the sequences of testing what secrets your opponent might have. You know, you check for Counterspell, you might check for Mirror Entity, but when you're actually ready to make your attacks, if a secret's in play and you don't know what it is, and Vengeful Visage is still a possibility, you just attack with your lowest attack minion first. Likely to be some scenarios where maybe your opponent is Hunter and they hit you with a King Crush and you send the 8 damage back into your opponent's face. I would assume that that's going to be pretty rare. The higher up the ladder you go, easy secret to play around and not that great. I don't think this is going to see play at all, but it could generate some moments again if it's randomly generated. Mage as a whole, you know, we've seen several of their cards revealed. I am at least somewhat interested in this volatile skeleton package. You think about running 2 copies of this. That 2 copies of this would be 4, 6, 7, and then also with the volatile skeleton, the neutral card, that gives us a 9-card package. Could be used for just removal, could be used to stay safe as we work towards a different win condition, and possibly this could even be a win condition. We're going to have to get the rest of the cards in the set, and we're also going to have to actually get in and see what other people are playing, but it at least intrigues me just a little bit. The concern that I would have about this package is that it's just not very high skill. It's going to be one of those things that it doesn't necessarily offer you a lot of opportunities to be able to outplay your opponent. So that's going to be something that could limit how successful this deck is, thinking along the lines of like Mech Mage. Yes, it's strong, but as you move up the ladder, it's easier for people to expect what you're playing, and it's easier for them to be able to counterplay against you. So, but an interesting package, and again, I think it's something that'll definitely see play on some level. You know, possibly even a tier 2 deck in the meta. Hard to believe that it would be tier 1, but again, hard to say without other cards being revealed. Neutral cards, Volatile Skeleton we've already talked about. Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. Almost exclusively going to be part of this Mage Volatile Skeleton package. Maybe some other Death Rattle decks could find some use for it, but just the low 2 damage, not very likely, at least in my opinion, based on what we've seen so far. Murloc Holmes, 3 mana, 3/4, solve 3 clues about your opponent's cards to get copies of them. This card is bad. People might try to meme with it, but it's not a good card. You put a 3/4 minion in play, you're basically guessing, hoping to be able to get extra value, and it's just not going to be very good. I don't plan on playing this card at all whatsoever. 2 mana, 2/3, Priest of the Deceased, Taunt, Infuse, gain 2/2. So again, neutral cards in general just aren't very good. If you can get this card in your hand early and infuse it 3 times, it's a 2 mana 4/5, which 2 mana for a 4/5 is cheap. That's a pretty good deal. I roughly think of that as being a 4/5 is a 4 mana minion. So you would save 2 mana there, but you don't really want to be holding a 2-drop in your hand that long to be able to play it as a 4/5 with Taunt. I don't think it's going to be that good. I don't think it's going to see any play whatsoever. Prince Renathal, 3 mana, 3/4. Likely we're already playing games with this. I know I haven't actually played games. I enjoy playing against people that play this because I don't think the card is very good in Standard at the moment. Deck size and starting health increased to 40. Typically what I've seen is people are basically watering down their deck with 10 lesser quality cards, making it less likely that they draw into their good cards, and that a lot of times means that the 10 extra health is actually irrelevant. I'm not a fan of this. I do think that this card gets better over time. As more cards are introduced, more quality cards get introduced, then the decks that are using this are going to get better, again, over time. Taking a look at Priest here, we have the Priest location, 3 mana, Cathedral of Atonement. Give a minion 2/1 and draw a card. I think this is a great location. This is definitely going to be going in Priest decks. Again, you just throw this down when you have 3 extra mana, and then it has 3 charges at your leisure. You can buff minions that are on the board and draw a card. You think about potentially playing this on turn 3, and then you could use it to buff a Samuro on turn 4 for an early board clear. Things of that nature. It's going to be card draw for Priest decks that are more minion heavy. Priest, of course, has the Handmaiden. That's draw 3 cards if you've played 3 spells that while it's in your hand. So this is card draw for a minion heavy Priest deck. So I do think this is going to be good. This is definitely going to see play. That's a good location. Priest has a good card in this one. Another Priest card, Suspicious Usher, Battlecry. Discover a legendary minion. If your opponent guesses your choice, they get a copy. I'm not too big of a fan of this card. If you think about discovering a really good legendary, likely your opponent is going to know the legendary that you took. Based on the skill level of your opponent, it's going to be easier for them to decipher what legendary you may have taken based on the board state, based on what your deck is, and the game plan that you have for your deck to be able to win the game. So you might be able to create a legendary for yourself, but you're going to give it also to your opponent. For example, if you discover Gigafin, and your opponent's able to decipher that you've taken a Gigafin, you play Gigafin, and they play a Gigafin that eats yours. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of that kind of thing. I don't think the card is very good. Just too much of a downside with your opponent being able to also pick a legendary. And worst case scenario, they have a 1 out of 3 being able to guess it, even if you get 3 bad choices or 3 maybe unorthodox choices. So not very good, at least in my opinion. Druid, only Druid card that's been revealed so far is the Druid location, Hedge Maze. Trigger a friendly minion's death rattle. Of note here, this card only has 2 charges. We're going to really have to wait to see what the rest of the set holds as far as death rattles. I don't think there's anything too great right now as far as Druid death rattles. I don't think there's anything too good as far as neutral death rattles either. Potentially you could be looking at some type of aggro Druid deck that might want to run this and maybe trigger like a Nerubian Egg or something, but overall this card is going to need more support, and we're going to have to see what's introduced in the set. This could be a card that's more for the future, maybe a couple of sets down the road if some death rattles get added. So we're just going to have to wait and see whether or not this card is going to be any good or not. Moving on to Shaman. We got the Shaman location card here. Muck Pools. Transform a friendly minion into one that costs 1 more. Only 1 mana. Like an evolved deck that you would want to play this card in, you're going to drop this on turn 1, and then you've got 3 charges, and you could pretty much wait as long as you want to be able to use it. I think it could be good. It's going to depend on how good the evolve archetype is. We do see other evolve support. Right here beside it, Baroness Vaj. If this would transform into a minion, summon that minion instead. So if you have Muck Pools on board and you try to transform Vaj, Vaj is going to stay, so you would have your 3/6 still on the board, and then you're going to summon the 5-drop that Lady Vaj was attempting to evolve into. So got some synergy here for evolve, and then as well as Primordial Wave, transform enemy minions into ones that cost 1 less, friendly minions into ones that cost 1 more. So potentially a way to be able to swing the board back in your favor. I know evolve is a sore subject for a lot of people. It's not necessarily fun to see your minions getting turned into something useless, and your opponent potentially high rolling on the evolves as they move up the mana ladder when it comes to those minions. So Evolve Shaman looks like it's receiving some support. We're just going to have to wait and see exactly how good it is and how well it's going to be positioned in the meta. Developers have stated that they're going for a more board-based meta, so it potentially is going to be harder for an Evolve Shaman to be able to stick minions on the board, to be able to use, say a Primordial Wave on Lady Vaj or Baroness Vaj. Is probably not going to last on the board very long either, so could be really limited as far as how good Evolve Shaman is. Again, we're just going to have to wait and see what's the other decks, what are people playing, and how easily can we get a board and be able to evolve it. Taking a look at Rogue here, we've got the Rogue location, only Rogue card revealed so far. Door of Shadows. Draw a spell, infuse 2, add a temporary copy to your hand, and they actually don't have the durability on this card. So I don't know if it's 2 or 3. Every location card so far has been either 2 durability or 3 durability. So unless it actually is only 1, it's just not indicated on the card here. Likely you'll be able to get multiple uses out of this, but adding a temporary copy of the card to your hand is pretty useful. Especially thinking about things like a thief rogue or a jackpot rogue. You could potentially add a, something good to your hand, say like a Blood in the Water, say in a Shaman vessel. Temporary copy, so actually allowing you to potentially, if you can infuse this card, to create an extra copy of one of the better cards in your deck. So we'll have to see how this goes and what the durability actually is. This card doesn't strike me as being great, just because it could actually be just a little bit slow. It's more of a value-based card, and Rogue tends to be more tempo-based decks unless it's a combo-based Rogue. So we'll have to wait and see how this is. Not too high on this card, but it could have potential. And warrior cards that have been revealed. We've got the Warrior Legendary Decimator Olgra. Battlecry, gain 1/1 for each damaged minion. And since that doesn't say enemy minion, we can take that to mean that it's also going to be minions on our side of the board as well. Then attack all enemies. So if there's a large board of damaged minions, then you're going to get a large Decimator Olgra. And this card is also going to hit face unless it dies from attacking minions first. So I think this card is likely going to be good. 3/7 is base stats, and then when you play this, you're going to be expecting that it's going to get buffed for damaged minions that are also on the board. Might be some combo potential to play with something like Whirlwind or something else that could damage the other minions on the board. So Warrior, could potentially play this in a Control Warrior deck, use it just as board clear. Could attempt to try to play it as some type of a finisher if you can get like 7 or 8 damage going to your opponent's face. We'll just have to wait and see what the rest of the set looks like and how things are going to develop. I do think this card has potential. And the Warrior Location Sanguine Depths, deal 1 damage to a minion and give it 1 attack, 1 mana, 3 durability. Don't quite know what to make of this card yet. We're going to have to see if there's additional enrage effects. Again, this card doesn't strike me as being good. Quite honestly, it feels like this card probably is going to be not so good based on what else might be being played or what might be being revealed in the rest of the Murder at Castle Nathria set. That is the 20 cards that we've seen so far. More reveals are going to be happening throughout the month. Really excited to see those cards. I'm going to be putting together more card reviews as those times come. I'm Uncorrupt. Good luck out on the ladder.